everybody. Welcome to the Radical Candor Podcast. I'm Kim Scott.
I'm Amy Sandler, and today we're talking about a topic that you likely have some strong feelings about and is also a thing where you spend a lot of your time, and that is meetings. So we wanted to get some advice. Can I say have a meeting? I'm so excited.
We're having a conversation.
Well, can't meetings be conversations? We're going to explore that and more with Dr. Stephen G. Rogelberg, an organizational psychologist who holds the title of Chancellor's Professor at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. He's an award-winning teacher and researcher and the author of The Surprising Science of Meetings, How You Can Lead Your Team to Peak Performance. And that book has been on over 25 best of lists. In fact, Adam Grant has called Stephen the world's leading expert on how to fix meetings. Stephen, your newest book, Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-on-One Meetings, recently came out, and we're really going to focus on that today. In fact, Dan Pink noted that you are the world's leading scholar of meetings and that you're unpacking the most important meeting of all, which are these direct conversations between managers and team members. So we're really excited to welcome you to our show and to talk about how we can make the most of our one-on-one meetings. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. It is truly an honor and a treat.
Well, I've been looking forward to chatting with you all weekend, actually, Stephen.
Well, that's awesome. Well, the last time we got to see each other, we were eating eyeball pie.
Yeah. we were having a dinner that was supposed to be very fancy, but I was joking with you later that my son, when he has sleepovers, when he has all his friends over, he's 15, they dare each other to eat disgusting things. There's a little bit of that at that dinner.
Yeah, that's fair. That is absolutely
fair. Did you
fair.
eat the eyeball in the
eyeball?
Oh
my gosh, I did. I
did not. So the eyeball pie was served next to a fish's head, which was with its mouth wide open, and I dropped the eyeball into the fish's mouth.
I'm going to say I regretted eating the eyeball, but I felt the pressure. You know, like you're at this restaurant, it's super fancy. Yeah. Supposedly it's the greatest. So when someone serves you an eyeball pie, you're like, oh, I guess I should eat the eyeball pie. But no, it did not rock my world. It only filled me with an eyeball and regret.
And what did it taste like, the eyeball?
Well, just your typical eyeball.
Was it salty? Was it like caviar? What was it like?
What was the eyeball like? All right, you're going to reintroduce my trauma. You know, this was after therapy. I think it was just kind of like a salty little ball of eyeball yuck.
Well, I'm not sure the best segue here. My eyeballs have been quite overextended, popping. Was this the first time the two of you met at this fancy dinner, or had you been acquainted previously?
We were at a conference together, and the conference was great. We had a great time at the conference, and the conference organizers did a really good job kind of creating community among all the speakers. Mm-hmm. So it was great. We had a good time. And our spouses were there. It was fun.
That was really fun. And it's called the President's Summit, and it's kind of like Denmark's TED event. And so I think Kim went on right before me. Mm-hmm. Loved her work. It was so good, and it connected so much with my content as well. So yeah, we were just quick, fast friends, and like, let's find excuses to do more together.
So
Wonderful.
Here we are.
Well, this is exciting. Again, your topic, Stephen, is something that I think we all have strong feelings about. In fact, one of the pieces of data I found most fascinating was you said there are 1 billion meetings happening every day. Am I overstating, or is that actually a piece of data that you have uncovered?
That's true. In fact, it's a conservative estimate.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's 2 billion at least.
Yeah, it's conservative. I mean, when I was doing these estimates, I just tried to keep rounding down.
Yeah.
Because really, once you hit 1 billion, it doesn't matter anymore if you say 2 billion. So that's a fair estimate. It's only increased. During COVID, it was hitting highs. I'd like to say when the pandemic ended, meetings went away, but they didn't.
No.
There's been some retraction, but it's pretty, because once you start having meetings, right, it's easy to put a meeting on and it's hard to get rid of it. And so they just keep increasing.
Yeah, they're kind of like barnacles. You gotta scrape them off your ship or your ship will stop in the water.
It's
Meetings.
exactly like barnacles. It's exactly, there's no difference.
And how many people are in the average meeting?
So that's a trickier question to answer. Because we just know, I mean, basically we can, harvest this calendar data just to know how many hours and how many meetings people are in. But
Mhm.
typical meeting sizes are between 4 and 7 is probably the most common.
Yeah. So let's call it 5, and let's say it's an hour. That's 5 billion hours of person
Yeah.
hours of meetings per day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oof.
And that was, we actually used low end estimates of annual wages to kind of figure out the investment. What's so fascinating about meetings, it's literally, or I should say, it's arguably the most expensive thing organizations do that they don't
Yes.
evaluate in any way,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
meetings cost more than IT for an organization.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yet with IT, we have a chief technology officer or
There's a lot of
CIO.
scrutiny.
Yeah, but when it comes to meetings, we're like, no, no, let's just keep having more. But one estimate was around 15% of your entire personnel budget is meetings. That's a massive expenditure.
Yes. Yeah. And so what does that billion meetings cost the economy every day? Roughly.
Trillions.
Did you trillion?
Yeah, yeah, I was in there too. Yeah,
Wow.
it's crazy.
Wow.
Well, and when you talk about, the cost, both the financial cost, the human time cost, one of the other pieces of data was that you said that when people are asked what is the biggest time waster for them at work, it's too many meetings. And so I wonder, before we get into the one-on-one meetings, which will be our focus for today, what is your maybe top 1, 2, or 3 things? Obviously, we need meetings, but how should people, if you're thinking about reducing the time wasting and the money wasting component of meetings, what would you say your top tips are for folks as they
Sure.
think about larger, these 5 to 7 people meeting?
Yep. I mean, there's so many. People are terrible at running meetings, and they think they're good at it, which is a terrible combination. When you survey people leaving a meeting, the leader thinks it went well and the attendees don't. So there's this misperception that tends to perpetuate like these bad meeting practices, right? So if we know, like everyone says meetings are a problem, well, why aren't they getting better? Well, if you think you're good at it, then basically you keep saying it's someone else's problem. But I guess a couple things that I would love to see organizations doing going forward is one, it's time to have a meeting about meetings. Yes, I know the irony, but if people are spending this amount of their time in meetings, yeah, we need to take a step back and talk about them. We need to take a step back and start saying, is this meeting necessary? What about this meeting? What about this one? Who needs to be there? And for those people who aren't there, how do we keep them in the loop? So we want to start normalizing conversation so we can start fixing it. Instead of just giving energy to the grousing and the complaints, let's take that energy and make it work for us. So let's start plotting a new future of work where meetings can be described in a more positive way. And that starts with these conversations. And then when it comes down to some specifics. So first of all, from an organizational perspective, we need someone on the leadership team to hold up their hand and say, own meetings. I'm going to
Mhm.
own this critical work process. I'm going to make sure that this is working for us. Build feedback and accountability systems, right? So look at your engagement survey. Is there any content on meetings? I know the answer is going to be no, and there should be. We need to start providing feedback and accountability. How can we do better if there's no feedback or accountability loops? So we need to start creating a ecosystem where bad meetings are just not accepted as the cost of doing business. Instead, we are dedicated to making these truly work for us. And then when you start getting in, and I'll just share this one last thing and then I'll stop. When we start getting into the weeds of the actual meeting, I'm going to share with you my favorite intervention, which is instead of framing your agenda as a set of topics to be discussed, consider framing your agenda as a set of questions to be answered. And by framing your agenda as a set of questions to be answered, now you actually have to stop and think about why you're having a meeting, right? It's to answer these questions. And by having an agenda framed as questions, you know who to invite to the meeting. They're relevant to the questions. You know if the meeting has been successful because the questions have been answered. By framing your agenda items as questions, you created a challenge that draws people in. And if you just can't think of any questions, it likely means you don't need a meeting.
So I'm guilty of sometimes calling meetings because I know we need to figure something out, but I haven't done the work alone of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I want somebody else to do. And so my temptation would be, what should I be asking you? That's the agenda. Like, how do you make sure that the questions that you're asking are actually valuable questions?
They should tie to something strategic and important. So if
Yeah.
your question is, I'm struggling with how to come up with some app or program to address this challenge, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to draw folks in, and it reflects really well on you as a leader, right? You're being candid,
Yes.
right? Transparent.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that just draws people in. I mean, it's hard to find a human being that doesn't jump at the possibility of answering a question.
Yeah. Yeah, we instinctively want to do that.
It's
Ca
just,
so
we're
can
wired that way.
I know I'm putting you on the spot because I haven't talked to you about this before, but I have a question for
Sure.
you. So one of my favorite ideas that we've never done anything about, so here's a question for you, is I think that my hypothesis is that part of what goes wrong in meetings is that there's a lot that goes unsaid. There's a lot of ruinous empathy in meetings and radical candor speak. So one of the things, do you remember that Simon Says game where there were 4 buttons and you would hit the button? One of
Mhm.
the things that I would love to do is to create a sort of like a radical candor framework where you could hit the ruinous empathy button if you feel like something's going unsaid.
So I would say that actually just joking around it is actually a fantastic intervention,
Yes.
because ultimately what you're doing is you're creating norms, right? You're being
Yeah.
explicit around the
Yeah.
types of conversations that we want to have.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to do because we don't have that. Those conversations aren't taking place.
Yeah.
So I would say that while I don't know if you actually need the device, talking about the device,
Yes.
showing a potential device just gets people to realize that the rules of engagement are going to be different, right? We want to
Yes.
honor people's time. We want to make this worthwhile. And to
Yeah.
make it worthwhile, we have to listen effectively and we have to engage effectively.
Mhm.
And let's get that norm out there.
Yeah. And what about soliciting feedback at the end of the meeting about the utility of the meeting? Like that might give the person who led the meeting a pretty good signal about whether people found it effective or not. What do you think about that?
I mean, Kim, you know this more than I do. I mean, the tricky thing is they're not candid,
Yes. But if
right?
it's a
So
yeah,
they feel pressure. And
to
the
say,
other
"Oh
thing,
yeah, that was great."
exactly. And the other thing that we found in our work is people have been beaten down so much by meetings that they basically think they're all going to be horrible. So if it's not really, really horrible, they say, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's why, like, what we found when we do these assessments of meeting effectiveness, we actually have to do it in very subtle ways.
Mhm.
And so I do these assessments with organizations about trying to create a dashboard around their meetings and to assess return on investment. And you just can't ask people, how good are your meetings? You actually have to kind of break down the time. So you want people to kind of reflect on the minutes in the meetings, and then you'll start to get at the
Yeah.
ineffectiveness.
That's cool.
But one of the things that emerged is that when we did these interviews of thousands of leaders and we asked them, or thousands of attendees, what are the characteristics of the best meeting leaders? And what emerged is this notion of stewardship,
Mhm.
that the best meeting leaders recognize that inherently they're a steward of others' time. Now,
Mhm.
when you think about that expression, being a steward of others' time, that means that the thought of people leaving your meeting saying it was a terrible waste is so uncomfortable to you that you
Mhm.
take a couple minutes and you become intentional, right? You say,
Yeah.
okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan. I'm thinking about challenges I might have, and I'm thinking about ways of dealing with it. In so many regards, it's what you all did before this conversation. Right. So we've all done a million podcasts, but still, before we did this, you created a plan of action, right? You took a few minutes and said, hey, here's what the potential conversation can go. What do you think? Does this seem valuable? That was good stewardship behavior. And so when leaders they embrace this notion of stewardship, they start making thoughtful choices. And interestingly, people act like stewards all the time when the meeting is with an important player, right? A key
Yes.
boss, a key customer. But when it comes to meeting with our peers or our team, we put our stewardship away.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
kind of like
such
putting
a
out
good
the
point.
nice china for the guests or something like that, and how to show folks that we care. With my responsibility to being a good steward of time, I do want to get us into one-on-one meetings. But before we do, there's obviously so much that we could talk about, Stephen, in terms
Yeah.
of larger meetings. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what you and Kim were talking about, if there is ruinous empathy or obnoxious aggression happening in a meeting. So from a radical candor perspective, we would talk about wanting to have criticism done privately,
Yeah.
Kim. But it sounds like there can be a way, and maybe humor is a good way, Stephen, to establish norms of how do we speak up in meetings, or how do so one of the things, Kim, that you do in your meetings is to be really clear on maybe having a role. What kind of meeting is it? Is it a debate meeting or is it a
I-
decide meeting? And so I'm wondering, Stephen, before we move into one-on-ones, is there, besides using humor, are there any other norms that you have found especially helpful that would fall into that, not wanting to criticize people publicly, but to kind of everyone own a part in feeling able to speak up in a meeting, that you found especially helpful?
I'll take it in a different direction and tell me if this is okay with you. This is it's going to seem like a tangent, but it's not. But see how it lands. One of the greatest tools for creating awesome conversations is silence. Silence. That when groups brainstorm in silence, just type directly into a shared document versus brainstorming it with their mouths. Those groups brainstorming in silence generated nearly twice as many ideas, and the ideas generated were more disruptive and more creative. And when you stop and think, why is that the case? Why would silence unleash all this stuff? Well, everyone can talk at once. You're less influenced by that boss's voice at the beginning. It's much more easy to deal with disagreement because you can just be constructive in generating ideas. You're adding comments which don't come across as aggressive. So I think a lot of the principles that Kim has talked about can actually happen very naturally when the meeting is done silently, which is kind of ironic, but it's true, right? You have very powerful communication when it's done in silence. And in so many regards, right, we always privilege people who are comfortable speaking. Well, there's a lot of people who are much more comfortable writing. My wife is a great example of that. We would have like a disagreement. This could be early on in our marriage where we would have more disagreements. And I thought it was done, but then I would get an email. And that email would rip me to pieces, and all my arguments would just come crumbling down because writing was her effective medium for being candid and transparent and for engaging with this information much more critically. So we can establish norms around communication and what we're looking for, which will actually go a long way. When you tell people, listen, we're going to keep our contributions to under a minute. We're going to keep them short. We want to make sure that you build off of others' conversations. We want conflict. We want to be resolved constructively, right? You can get people to display those behaviors if you basically establish that it's critical that they display these behaviors. With this all said, Amy, I want to make your job even easier. I'm going to give you the perfect segue to one-on-ones.
Oh,
You ready?
thank you. Yes. Segue away. Thank you.
So we've slammed meetings pretty hard. We said there's a billion of them. People are pulling their hair out. True. But in the research, there's one meeting type that people actually want more of, not less. And that is the one-on-one. And that was fascinating to me. And so when we looked at and we collected this was multiple countries, and we looked at different levels of leaders. And yet there was this longing for this meaningful engagement with their manager. And so let me back up now and tell you what I mean by a one-on-one meeting. So we're kind of all on the same page.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's tons of one-on-one conversations in an organization. That's not what I mean. When I talk about a one-on-one meeting, I'm talking about a meeting that's facilitated and orchestrated by a manager, but it's not for them. It's for their people. It is a meeting designed to better understand the thoughts and needs and desires of the employee. And by doing so, engage with them on a journey of discovery and meeting the needs that exist. So the types of utterances from the manager are things like, help me understand, tell me more. What are your thoughts on how to handle this? How can I better support you, right? What else do you need that I can help with? And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this one-on-one meeting. It's a meeting about bringing humanity back into the workplace, not because it's great to have humanity in the workplace, but it's actually really good business. Because the data is also really consistent that when managers have these one-on-ones with their people, individuals are more engaged, they're more productive, teams actually meet their goals more readily. I mean, this research is not like these rinky-dink studies. This was a study that was done by Gallup that involved over 1 million managers. And there was a strong connection between these one-on-ones done well and employees thriving. And we actually know this, and I'll stop after this statement, that when we think about people leaving an organization, we've all heard the adage, right? People don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses.
Yes.
And one-on-ones are your opportunity to prove you're not a bad boss.
Yes, by listening. I mean, like you
Absolutely.
don't get to set the agenda of the one-on-one. Your
Nope.
employee, the person it's
Exactly.
like it's another opportunity for you to lay your power down and get
Exactly.
on a level playing field and really be a thought partner to each of
Yeah.
your direct reports.
It,
That's what it's
yeah.
all about.
It's
Totally
connection.
agree. Yeah.
It's genuine connection. It's non-egocentric listening. It's going where this other person is
Yep.
and meet them there and support them.
Yes.
And that's what everyone craves, right? People don't crave like I mean, you think about COVID, what people really missed was meaningful connection,
Yeah,
right?
real human
Real
conversations.
human conversations. And
And
that's what
that's
this is.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's so funny because I think very often managers will say something along the lines of, oh, I don't want to get in my people's way. I don't
Mhm.
want to, I don't want to micromanage. And so I'm not going to spend any time with my direct
Right.
report. And that is a disaster. When I was working with Dick Costello to develop this class called Managing at Twitter, he was like, that is ridiculous when people do that. Imagine if I went home and told my wife, I don't want to micromanage you raising the children, so I'm not going to show up at dinner to like that. That would not go well, you know?
You're so
And
right. You're so right.
and so if you remember that core to being a good boss is the relationship that you have with each of your direct reports, relationships need time. You cannot build a relationship unless you spend time with people. And they don't happen by magic. Like imagine if you said the secret to a good marriage is to choose the right person and never spend another minute with them. Like
Right.
that's not going to work.
That's right.
And it's the same thing between I mean, it's not a marriage, it's not a romance. Like I want to be real clear about that.
Yeah.
But that basic truism about human relationships applies.
It's so true. So first about the micromanaging piece, in my book, I had these frequently asked questions that directs can have when a manager wants to roll out the one-on-ones. And one of the questions is, well, is this about micromanaging my stuff? And the answer is it's about micromanaging if you micromanage.
Yes. Yeah.
Just don't micromanage. Just
Yeah.
have a conversation on someone else's terms.
Yes.
And so therefore don't make it about metric tracking unless the
Yeah.
employee wants to talk about it. Like you can get updates, status updates. You
Yes.
can get metric tracking updates lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Let's
You
just
can,
make
but
this 20 or 30 minutes about a relationship
yeah.
and a conversation. Again, like you might have a manager says, well, I don't have time. I don't need to babysit people. I don't need these relationships. Just do your job. But it is so good for business. Like
Yes.
it is an investment that pays dividends. And so even if you remove the fact that one of the best predictors of life satisfaction is the helping of other humans. So let's even remove that this is good for you when you help other people.
Yeah.
Removing that, the fact is that if you have greater retention of your top talent, right? If people are more coordinated and aligned, if people don't have to keep reworking what they were doing because they're having these conversations, you're saving time.
Yes.
And one of the surprising things that emerged in some data was the fact that managers, when they made the investment, actually reported less interruptions because employees would just save their issues for the one-on-one. So as opposed to constantly checking in with their manager, they felt more confident because they knew they would have this opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's so important. By the way, I think another mistake that managers make about their one-on-ones is they think that they should save their feedback up to give their employees feedback in a one-on-one. And I strongly recommend don't use the one-on-one time that way. The best time to give any kind of especially critical feedback, but also praises in these impromptu,
Sure.
in the moment kind of conversations. The time to the I would say the one exception, the one thing you as the manager get to put on the agenda of the one-on-one is save 5 minutes at the end to solicit feedback. Don't give it, but this is your time to ask, what could I do or
Yeah.
stop doing that will make it easier to work with
I
me
like
or
it.
whatever
Yeah.
question. Don't ask my, if you sound like Kim
Yeah.
Scott, people won't believe
Yeah.
that you want the answer. But
Yep.
figure out how to solicit feedback in your one-on-one, but
And
don't give it.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, those are great. Those are great thoughts. And so what you can do in a one-on-one is you could ask the direct, is there any feedback that I can share with you that would be helpful? And
Yes.
so you can let them, right? You can set the stage for them asking you for feedback. But yeah, if you have a performance issue or something you need to provide feedback, do it elsewhere
Yes.
when it's timely. Because again, I don't want to pollute the intention of this one-on-one. And then I love the idea providing an opportunity for the employee to provide you with feedback.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, though, you do need to build that trust, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
where you can't start with that. But ultimately, if you can move to that model where the employee feels comfortable and safe to be candid, I mean, now you have a healthy team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they'll never
Stephen,
feel comfortable. Sorry, Amy, I interrupted. I don't think they'll ever feel comfortable, but if they know that their candor will be rewarded,
Right.
then they'll do it anyway.
Exactly.
Sorry, Amy.
yeah, no, oh no, no. I think just bringing in that idea of trust and safety for folks who are listening, Stephen, whether I'm a new manager or whether I really haven't been doing one-on-ones and I'm trying to get started. Can you walk us through actually some of the practical tips of like, how do I get started? Let's say you've got this new hire, Kim. What are you going to do to reach out to Kim? What are you going to say in that outreach, set up the idea of one-on-ones, and how are you going to actually start the meeting?
There's a lot there.
Yeah. Wherever you want to start. How do you get started?
So first of all, I mean, when you roll these out, this idea, or if you reboot it, tie it to your values and to the organization's values. You know, people are very skeptical if they think this is just a flavor of the month. But if you say, listen, core to me as a manager is elevating and supporting my people, helping others thrive. This is so important to me. And in that spirit, I'm going to do these one-on-ones. And we will go through these one-on-ones. We'll solicit feedback. We're going to make these work. But ultimately, these are about elevating you and the team. And I think to the extent that it does tie to values, it just feels more real. And so that's how I recommend kind of rolling it out. Let's tie it to something important. In fact, in the last chapter of my book, the second book, The Glad We Met, I actually took all these organizational mission statements and value statements and just showed how they completely fit with one-on-ones. And they do. So rolling this out effectively matters. Then you got to pick a cadence. And generally when you ask people their preferred cadences, it's typically weekly or every other week. The most desired cadence was weekly, by the way. And what was also found, though, in the research is that the cadence that had the most positive outcomes was also weekly. Because going back to like what Kim said, like, you know, if you're trying to build a connection, a meaningful connection, you have to do it with momentum.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine if you have a monthly conversation with your partner, that relationship's not going to really thrive.
Yeah.
And so that regularity is really important. But here's the cool thing, Amy, the data on having these regular, totally clear. The amount of time in the one-on-one mattered much less. It's quality of the minutes. So if you do this weekly and it's 20 awesome minutes, you're going to get the benefit. But it's about the quality of the minute.
Yeah.
And I really
think
love that.
That is so helpful, especially when people are feeling really time crunched. There was something interesting. Correct me if I got this wrong, Stephen, because Kim and I have talked about this a bit, which is, you know, Kim, we love this idea of like going for a walk, like walking and talking while we're on meetings or
Sure.
getting away from the video camera and some of the research on that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, it looked from your data that actually meeting in the boss's office was most preferred. Am I getting that right? Like where
weird.
that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, we laid out all the various locations a one-on-one could be. And the one that was rated most desirably was either in the manager's office or a conference room. The lowest rated was actually in the employee's office. And then when it came to walking, it was a bimodal distribution. So there were some folks who absolutely loved it and others that didn't. So the takeaway from that is just simply to ask your direct, where would you like to have this? That's a nice signal, right? So these one-on-ones convey signals. I love this notion of leader signals, and the things we do and don't do all become signals to our employees about who we are as leaders. And so when we say, listen, where would you like to have this meeting? That's a signal, right? That's a signal that this is not your typical meeting. This is for you. And imagine if we don't do these one-on-ones, what is that signal?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really important. the questions we lead with are signals, right? So if our question, we start with, hey, give me a rundown of all your projects. That's a signal that this is not for you. This is for me to get information I need
An
so I can
update, yeah.
control things. But if I ask you as a signal, listen, I'm interested in how you are. And I'm going to give you a twist on this question, though. I'm not saying this to the employee. So the general question of how are you actually doesn't work.
Yeah, because
when
there's
you
one answer, fine.
Right.
Fine.
But if you do a twist, right, you say, listen, I'm interested in how you are, but I want you to answer on a 10-point scale, with 1 being horrible, 10 being great. How are you? Now you get scores of 6s, of 7s, of 8s, and then you can say, tell me more, or how can I help you become an 8? Right? So you get data to work with. That becomes a signal, again, to your employees that this is different, that you are genuinely interested. You're not just dialing it in. So to get us started, we roll it out effectively. We pick a cadence of every week or every other week. We make sure that we let the employee drive the agenda. We can say, listen, here are a set of core questions that I could ask you. Do these work for you? Right? So that's a totally fine approach. Or we could do the listing approach where you tell the employee, hey, this is going to be a meeting for you. Come with a list of topics that you want to talk about. But when you do that, make sure you tell them to think big picture, small picture, think people, think team, because otherwise, if you just leave it open-ended, they're going to come with their rundown of tasks because they think that's what you want to hear. So you have to really prime them to think about their list. And then when you're in that meeting, you just get comfortable with help me understand, tell me more. When someone asks you for a potential solution, keep your mouth shut before, and then ask them, what are your thoughts on how to handle it? And then when they share with you an idea, unless the idea makes you vomit, go with their idea, right? We don't demotivate them by just saying, oh, if it doesn't match my magical idea, we're not doing it, right?
Yeah.
Let's allow them space to try something and learn from it. Again, unless it causes us to really vomit. And then, the close is really important, right? The close of these things is where we come together and make sure that we have clarity around what was agreed upon. So here's what I committed to doing, and you said you were going to do this. Fabulous. And then document it, some level of
By the way,
documentation.
sorry to interrupt, but you said something really important right there. I think the manager should come out with action items. The direct report should not, as a general rule, come out
I
with
would
action
agree.
items of
I
this
agree.
meeting.
The thing that the direct could do as their pseudo action item is, let's say you've talked about a strategy for dealing with a particular issue. And so hopefully the direct will then feel motivated to address that. But it's a different type of an action item that a manager is committing to do something to help that other person.
Yeah. The more committing to help action items you come out of the meeting with, the more successful the meeting was.
Exactly. And then the final thing I would say is, evaluate these things, right? Just to make sure it's really working. Check in with the employee and just say, listen, I want this to work for you. What can we do better? What should we change up? Depending on your relationships, you could do it in a one-on-one, a conversation, or administer a survey where you just ask all your directs, start, stop, continue. And, let's just make this thing work for everyone.
Can I add one more thought?
Yeah.
Feel free to push back if you think I'm wrong. But one of the things I found in my coaching experience is that sometimes a leader will decide that they're going to have all their one-on-ones on one day of the week. And I think that's a huge mistake, because it's tiring. Like, listening to people is really it requires something of you. And if you do them all in one day, by the last one, you'll no longer be able to listen, and you'll start to hate them. So I think one of the things that I recommend, because I mean, I've been there, you're so busy and you start to think, I would really like this 30 minutes to myself, or this hour to myself. I tried to start to treat one-on-ones like lunches with with people, with friends, or with people who I really wanted to see. Because I found that often I'd go to a conference and I'd meet somebody interesting and I'd say, let's meet for lunch. And I'd be looking forward to that lunch all day. And I tried to bring that mindset to my one-on-ones.
I love it.
Because these are people you're working with, and it should be a pleasure to have a conversation with this person. I
love it. No, there's nothing I disagree with that. We recently published a study. This is not what you're talking about, but it moves into the scheduling realm. Generally, and this was also data from Google, that people are most productive and feel better about their day when meetings are more clustered together
Mhm.
or clustered around natural breaks, because that
Mhm.
way they're not interrupted over and
Yeah.
over again. So they still have opportunities for
Yes.
flow. But what also emerged, and this came from Microsoft in their analysis, it must have been, it was over 1 million meetings, that you need an interval between meetings, that basically 15 minutes between meetings where people can kind of collect themselves, take a bio break. So if meetings were clustered together with 15-minute intervals between them, so therefore they had some time for flow later, that was the optimal day
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people.
And figuring
And yeah,
figuring out how long a chunk of time you need for your flow is key. Like, when I first started
yeah,
writing, I would block these 4-hour chunks of
yeah.
time, and I found I can't concentrate for more than an hour and a
I
half.
mean,
There are some
same.
people who can, but, like,
Yeah,
figuring out how much alone time you need
yeah.
in your calendar and blocking that time is also, I think, really
I
important.
feel like this is such a great opportunity for meeting. Obviously I'm a meeting scientist, but I think this is such a great opportunity for meetings research is, just getting people to start being more thoughtful about how they schedule their meetings.
Yeah.
And because right now they're not. And so we don't at all embrace this literature around flow and interruptions. And I think if people were more thoughtful, it just wouldn't have the same types of negative effects on people's health and well-being.
In fact, there was one point when my days were just chock-a-block with meetings, and so
Yeah.
I put think time. I blocked
Hmm.
these hour and a half long chunks of time so I
Yeah.
could get into a flow
Yeah.
state.
Me
And
too.
people kept writing over them, And
Yeah.
I finally went to my assistant. I said, "This think time, this is my meeting with God. Nobody interrupts.
I love
Nobody
it.
interrupts."
I love it.
And that was very helpful way to
Yeah.
think about that. Time alone is precious,
Yeah. I
and
agree.
you also need to block it.
If
Like,
you don't respect your calendar, how do you expect anyone else to respect your calendar?
exactly.
Yeah. No, I do the same thing, Kim. If you looked at my calendar, which I would never let you look at because it's so embarrassing,
Mine too.
I schedule the weirdest things. I
Oh, yeah.
schedule, think about this. I mean, I'm
Yes.
just like all over the
Yeah,
place at
because
all times.
otherwise you wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about it, and
I
that's
know.
no good.
I feel so at peace. Like once I schedule it, like I just,
Yeah,
it's off my mind.
yes, yes. And then my problem is that I'm a little bit of the imp of the perverse. So sometimes if I schedule think about this, I'm like, I'm not going to think about that. But that gives me something to rebel against, which is also important for a rebel.
Okay.
It is. Well, before we close, Stephen, being mindful as steward of your time here, you talked about this idea of leadership signals, which I love. And what tip might you have for someone who is going into a meeting with their manager, whether
Yep.
you're an individual contributor or whether
Yeah.
you're a manager who's got, your own boss? Like, what's that
Yep.
mindset frame that would be helpful for
It's good.
folks?
It's good. So I have a whole chapter around that, and we collected data about looking at the key things directs need to do to make these work. And the chapter is basically kind of titled "It Takes Two to Tango." And so while the manager is facilitating and orchestrating, the direct does need to do something. And so a few of the key things, if I had to boil it down, one is you can't get what you want unless you know what you want.
Truth.
That is such a common mistake, right? We go into these engagements and then we complain about it afterwards, but we're not setting the person up for success unless we actually have thought about this is what I actually need. So
Yeah.
that's the first key thing. What do you actually need from this meeting? And
Mhm.
lead with that so you can get it. Second is that you have to feel comfortable asking for help. You just have to kind of engage and be willing to ask for help and support. So that level of involvement is another really critical piece. And then number 3, and this is maybe a good way to wrap things up too. Managers are not going to be good at this because humans are not good at this. Humans are not good at really taking a genuine interest in others. We're good about talking about ourselves. We're good at solving problems. But in terms of truly 100% focus on someone else, we're not trained and socialized that way. It takes work. It takes work. And directs need to understand and appreciate that this is a challenging position for a manager. And when that manager says to you, how can I help and support you? You want to reinforce that. You want to say, thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. And ultimately, by having this reinforcement, by having this patience, you're going to train the manager as well. And that manager will be more in sync and more comfortable with this role of simply of helping elevate others. And I think that's a really important takeaway. And let's be patient as that manager goes through her or his journey of great empathy and relationship building.
I love that. The manager is following, the direct report is leading. That's part of the tango, right? Is you're swapping off who's leading and who's following.
Love it.
All right. Well, I am so glad we met, Stephen. How can folks find you and get a copy of your book?
Definitely come to my website. So my website is stephenrogelberg.com, stephenrogelberg.com. And I really, really tried to make it into a resource center. There's so much on there to help folks, I think, on their one-on-one and meetings journey. Obviously, check out the book, buy the book. The cool thing is, I'm not making a penny off it. Every single dime in my royalties is being donated to the American Cancer Society. So buy the book if you want to learn about one-on-ones, or buy the book if you're interested in helping eradicate cancer. And so go to the website, get the resources, buy the book. Feel free to send me an email. I'm always happy to answer questions around the topic.
Thank you so much. And that is STEVENROGELBERG. If you want to check out his website. And by the way, I will vouch. There was a lot of great stuff on the website. And I love what you're doing to eradicate cancer as well. We are grateful. Kim, any last words?
Just thank you. I love everything you said about one-on-one meetings. That is the most important thing. Most important meeting you have with each of your direct reports each week is your one-on-one meeting.
The alternative title I considered, it wasn't my idea. This actually came from Adam Grant, where the alternative title for the book was The One Meeting That Should Never Be an Email.
Yes.
And I really liked it. It didn't test all that well because it didn't fit my brand, which is more, I'm more of a positive approach to meetings.
Yeah.
But that title really captures the whole essence of it. This is one that we have to have.
You can't email your relationships in.
You cannot email your relationships. Love that. That's another good alternative title.
Thank you so much for joining us. That's a wrap. Head on over to radicalcandor.com/podcast for the show notes for this episode. Praise in public and criticize in private. So if you like what you hear, please do rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us. And if you've got criticism, go ahead and email it to podcast@radicalcandor.com. Bye for now. The Radical Candor podcast is based on the book Radical Candor, Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity by Kim Scott. Episodes are written and produced by Brandy Neal with script editing by me, Amy Sandler. The show features Radical Candor co-founders Kim Scott and Jason Rosoff and is hosted by me, still Amy Sandler. Nick Carissimi is our audio engineer. The Radical Candor podcast theme music was composed by Cliff Goldmacher. Follow us on LinkedIn, Radical Candor the Company, and visit us at radicalcandor.com.